questions across the country. The number of course, looks a little bit different across states and cities, but the hiring challenges of this critical workforce are persistent throughout the country. And I'm sure that many of you are joining this call because you are feeling this in your own states and communities. And it's probably safe to assume that your state faced an inadequate supply of childcare and early learning opportunities even prior to the pandemic. So where do we go from here? How can we propel this trend upward and grow the early care and education workforce so that children have access to high quality early learning opportunities and parents can work and go to school? How can we improve working conditions so that the early childhood educators join and stay in the field? And what is the role of state legislators and legislative staff? These are questions that we here at NCSL have received a lot from you all over the last few years. What are states doing to expand childcare and early learning? It's often quickly followed with, how are states using their COVID relief dollars? And the answers to these questions, of course, are directly related to states' efforts to support the recruitment and retention of the workforce. For many policymakers, as we found in our conversations over the last few years, this has spurred broader questions about the workforce itself. Who's in the workforce? Who's receiving these funds? How has it helped? And what makes them stay in the field? Answering these questions requires data, often directly from those in the early childhood workforce. Data that many states do not have or were not gathering prior to the pandemic. So today we have asked 2 states who have been working on early childhood workforce data to join us. We have asked them to share what they learned, how they're using it, challenges that they faced in gathering it, and opportunities to continue to build and bolster their workforce data, as well as opportunities for states who are maybe at different starting places. We are hoping that you will have additional questions to ask of our presenters and drop them in our chat. My colleague Patrick is going to be watching the chat. Patrick, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. As Jenny said, my name is Patrick. I'm a senior policy specialist here at NCSL, focused on preschool to 3rd grade policy. And just want to say a special hello to our friends from Hawaii and Mississippi who are joining us today. Good to see you all.
And I'm Jenny Palmer. Many familiar faces here. Patrick and I have been working together over the last year to support states' efforts to grow their early childhood workforce. And we've done that by offering learning opportunities to states, or offering opportunities like you're on today, but also individualized technical assistance to a few states like Patrick mentioned. And so we would just love to offer our services to you if this is something your state is considering, something you might be interested in or curious to dig in, please reach out. And lastly, I'll just share that the slides from today and the resources shared today will be offered after the webinar. So that's enough from me. I am pleased to introduce you to our presenters, Dr. Wanzi Maruvi and Anna Powell. They are both senior research and policy associates at the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment out of the University of California, Berkeley. And they are going to tell us about their workforce study that they helped to lead in California. I'll stop sharing my screen and let you all take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Jenny. Anna and I will try to give a sort of an overview of what we've done, but we'll start off with providing some background that will help us all be on the same page, so to speak. Anna? Okay, you have already seen our faces. Okay, just a little bit of a background. I'm sure you are all familiar with the center, and I will just let people read about the center on their own, but just briefly to say that we conduct research and policy analysis about the characteristics of the ECE workforce. And our focus is that we also want to examine those policy solutions that are aimed at improving how the nation prepares, supports, and rewards these people who care and provide education to our youngest citizens with the goal of ensuring that they gain optimal development. So just probably to start off, I'm really happy because most of the introduction has already been provided by Jenny. But the big question is, why are we so focused on the workforce data right now? An important point to make is that the workforce is in crisis. The important point too is the fact that this crisis, however, predates the pandemic. Our workforce shortages have long been linked to the chronic low wages, lack of benefits, and the general undervaluing of the ECE work. And this has always been there, but the difference was that when the pandemic hit, it really did shine a spotlight on the problems that already existed prior to the pandemic hitting. And when the pandemic hit, we had this sudden drop in childcare jobs. And even though we have been on recovery has been very slow. If you think of it, the rest of the US sector have recovered or almost recouped most of their jobs they had prior to the pandemic. But with the childcare sector, we are still 8% short of the jobs that we had in February 2020 when the pandemic hit. So now what policymakers are realizing that they really need detailed and reliable information about their workforce. And they also need to find ways of tracking and supporting initiatives that can help show them up. And unfortunately, there is no nationwide administrative, readily available source of workforce data that states and regions can use for decision making. And what it means is that states and regions have to go and build workforce data on their own. Fortunately, there are some public dollars that can be used to do that. And we have examples, for example, with the PDG bid to 5 grant money. So just to the next slide, Anna. So on my part, before I shift it over to Anna to talk more about our work with the workforce study in California, I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the 2 common data systems that exist that are used by most of the jurisdictions in the country. I will talk about, give a brief introduction to the workforce registries as well as the workforce surveys. So these 2, while they are very different, when they are done very well, they can provide important workforce data that can help to answer a lot of really key policy questions. And what is also important is that ensuring that they are really good, reliable, comprehensive sources of comprehensive data that is up to date requires dedicated and sustained funding. So I just thought I should put it up front there. Both of them are strategies that would require some commitment. Anna? Okay, so I will just really do a rapid walk through how a registry might differ from a workforce study. So to begin with, what is a workforce registry? Basically, a workforce registry is a database of members of the licensed or registered educators. So historically, these were developed to track education, professional development, and quality initiatives. And they've been sort of an often opt-in option. However, we know that some jurisdictions are providing requirements for who must be part of the workforce registry. We also know that some states are now retrofitting their registries so that they can cover more workers, have more people participate in the registry, and also capture more data fields, more than just the educational and the professional development data that the system was originally designed. And most importantly, they can capture compensation data. An important point, again, back to my point, is that it requires long-term administrative support to keep the data timely and relevant. So these are important points that I think people, as they consider what to do, should always keep in mind. On the other hand, we have the workforce study. Basically, the workforce study is designed to take a representative snapshot of the entire workforce by it being customized, we mean that you start usually with your questions that you want answered, and then you go out and gather the data that allows you to answer those questions. So it is a very customized strategy, and it relies on a sampling strategy. And we know that many states are launching surveys or conducting focus groups to really understand what the situation is on the ground in relation to their workforce. And similar to the registry, each survey can, or data collection event can be a standalone event, but you can go back and resurvey at specific intervals. But the point being that, again, to ensure that you maintain the data relevant and up to date, and being able to capture information in the moment, you still have to commit to this dedicated ability to go back and recollect the data you need. So basically, this is sort of a high level and rough kind of comparison of the workforce registry and workforce study. So we just want to do a quick exercise to gather, to get a picture of what your experiences have been. What have you, like, which of these have you used in your state or territory? And if you have used both, we would like to know what have you, like, which one are you familiar with? Workforce registry, workforce study, or both? So if you have, you need to take out your phone, scan the QR code there, and then it should give you an option to open a link that will allow you to enter your response. So if you do that, you should be able to see the question, and then you should be able to answer the questions by selecting the options that most make sense to you. Okay. Yeah, it looks like neither is winning. And so far there's an equal split with people who have used the workforce study or both. But we still have a significant number of people saying they've used neither. Okay. So I guess we can say that our audience are familiar with at least one of the strategies. And I think that, like, the conversation will be much easier because you have had some experience or some with doing either of those. And for those who are saying neither, maybe this is also a good opportunity to learn what else can be done. I think we might have saturated our responses, right? Okay, so basically, when you have a strong workforce registry, it is able to help you answer fundamental questions. For example, who is in your workforce? Where do they work? And how much are they being paid? How well are they being compensated? This is very basic information, but it is really at the core of being able to analyze or assess most of the policy questions you have. But however, I want to highlight some common challenges that exist with workforce registries right now that you have to keep in mind. The first one is with regards to the representativeness of the data. So basically, this is asking who is in the registry relative to the population of ECE, of your ECE workforce. Like, does your registry collect data inclusive of all settings or inclusive of all program funding types? The reason why this is important is because you can only answer questions about the workforce population that is represented in your registry. So if your registry is only capturing, for example, let's say center-based workforce in centers, but is not capturing home-based workforce, then it means you can only speak about the center-based workforce. So therefore, who is in your registry determines how much information you can get or interpret with regards to the entirety of your ECE workforce. And the second challenge relates to the fact that the workforce registry can be limited in scope basically meaning that sometimes it cannot answer very burning questions. With this, we mean that even with the strongest workforce registry, the ability to answer burning or emergent or those in-depth questions is limited by the data fields, like the information that you are able to gather within your registry will determine what it is that you can actually say about the workforce. So there are certain information, for example, related to, say, turnover, drivers of burnout, issues related to workforce well-being, or even being able to study or understand the impact of specific interventions that you might have made. Having the registry alone might not be enough because you are limited by the information that you are actually capturing in the registry. And therefore, for some of those in-depth, deep dive kind of questions that you might need, there are other strategies that you have to use. And this is where the workforce studies usually come in. And before I hand it over to Anna, I just wanted to stress that a strong registry can really complement and facilitate more in-depth data collection you can have. So it's not an either or exercise, because, for example, if you are able to collect some of those basic sort of demographic, education, compensation data points with your workforce registry, then you can relieve resources so that you can focus on the in-depth questions with your workforce study. Another very often sort of estimated strength of having a good, strong registry is the fact that you can have access to the workforce, which can facilitate being able to distribute surveys, being able to invite people to participate in some of those more in-depth kinds of studies that are usually done with the workforce. So the point I just want to make is that they can be really good and complementary, especially if you have a strong workforce registry. You have a pathway to have like faster and even more cost-effective strategies for collecting more data. So with that, I will hand it over to Anna to take it off with the California workforce study.
Thank you, Wanzi. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. So California is a state in which we do technically have both. We do have a registry, and of course, we've conducted our workforce study. However, unlike some of the registries in the state where you may work, our registry is definitely an opt-in service, so it has patchy coverage of the workforce in the state, both regionally and by provider type and type of program that you may have. So it can't even answer basic questions like how many members of the workforce are there, where do they live, and what jobs do they have in the kind of statewide fashion. So our state brought in some major players. So in terms of who's involved in mounting workforce study, here's how we did it in California. We definitely had our Department of Education, as well as our statewide resource and referral agency, and First Five, which is another kind of government adjacent piece. Those three absolutely were involved in the scoping and mounting of this study. However, we actually did rely on substantial philanthropic dollars as well to put this study up. So we had two partners, Heising Simons Foundations and Lucille Packard. So in our case, knowing that we have a pretty large state, of course, and we had a lot of gaps to fill in with the data, we really needed to have the combination of those public and philanthropic dollars to get where we were going to go. And unfortunately, I don't know what type of public funding streams that we leveraged from the Department of Ed to fund the study, but if that's a burning question, I can certainly go look into it. So in scoping our study, we had a number of domains, including, as I mentioned, some of those basics, demographics of the workforce, for example, job characteristics, what type of position do they fill, how many children are in their group sizes, telling us more about the background and training of those educators, as well as core facts about their wages, benefits, not only from their hours as a childcare provider, but their broader financial situation to give us the context of really what is the economic well-being that they are living with. In addition to economic well-being, we had some questions about their physical and mental well-being, which we hear anecdotally a lot about, isolation, burnout, turnover, not even just anecdotally. And then what does the program look like? How are they staffed? How are the enrollments working out? What are the policies that they're using? Can also really get into the management there by not only surveying the teachers, but also the directors of programs. So we can learn about these broader patterns as well. And then finally, of course, we added a host of pandemic specific questions because this survey was implemented in 2020. It was originally going to go out in early 2020, and it ended up going out towards the end of the year. So we really beefed up this latter section to understand who is receiving PPP loans, how are they using the funds. The answer was to cover the basic program needs to keep them afloat. But that was really important information for California to have. So I'm going to now go through some findings that we had and then demonstrate how is California using this to inform policy? Because the core question is, what can you draw from your workforce? And so here's what examples of what California has been using. So first of all, we needed this basic information. Here's a profile just of the family child care providers, which is licensed home-based care in California. And we were able to answer, important questions about their age, their racial and ethnic background, the languages they speak, and also importantly, how many of them are born outside of the US? Of these home-based caregivers, 42% are born outside of the US in California. This may look different state by state, but has profound impacts for knowing how to contact folks, what languages to contact them in, what types of programs and professional development to offer. We can begin to think about those things by gathering this information. Here's a corresponding piece regarding the earnings of family child care providers, which are pretty difficult to estimate. So we're providing a range for family child care providers. And here we have small and large. So in California, we have different licensing offerings depending on the capacity for enrollment. So small is up to 6 children and large is 12 to 14, just for your background. And we're able to capture what are their earnings. And as you can guess, these may fall short of minimum wage in the respective areas where folks are living because they're self-employed and therefore not following labor laws. But we hear anecdotally a lot about the low wages of home-based providers, but now we can really see just how low they are. And related, how few of them have retirement from any source. So many of them are over 50, right? But only 21% of the entire category has ever gained a single dollar of retirement savings. So this finding in particular, here's your first example, has gone directly into state collective bargaining with a child care providers union, a new presence in California just in the past 3 to 5 years. Their initial rounds of bargaining have really focused on, for example, bringing in retirement savings for those who are receiving subsidized enrollments through the state. So it's been able to focus, figuring out what is the core need for the workforce to allow these educators to continue staying and doing the work that they're doing instead of seeking a job just so they can, at the 11th hour, start trying to build retirement savings so they can retire with dignity. So an example of a super important finding from the workforce study. Another finding, once again, a strong registry might be able to answer this particular part. What are the educational attainment and experience of the child care center-based staff? So on the aides, it might be surprising for folks to learn that even among aides, a quarter already have a bachelor's degree or higher. Then, of course, among the lead teacher side, we're a little less surprised, but still important to note that more than half already have a bachelor's degree. So when we're beginning to think about quality improvement initiatives, we're asking folks to upskill or gain additional degrees, you can begin to scope how many folks might that be. And in California, we're expanding school-based pre-K. It's called TK. And in that context, you will need to have a bachelor's degree to be eligible for the job. So it's super important to note how many educators who already have experience working in these other settings have that bachelor's degree. They might need to get additional qualifications, but it's important to note, well, actually already a lot of people might have some of those foundational skills that are going to be required to get those school-based preschool teaching jobs. So this was important for California to know as we're trying to figure out how the heck are we going to expand school-based preschool. And I'm going to skip over a couple of the remaining ones, but just conclude by showing related to this question of who's going to have access to this transitional kindergarten teacher job. You'll note that it's a really meaningful question, seeing as the median salary would be doubling for a person who is currently working in a home-based or center-based setting. So it's not just a question of what do they stand to gain, but who, a major equity question for the state to think about creating access and pathways into this transitional kindergarten school-based teaching position. Very important to know that it would be a meaningful, life-changing salary increase, as well as getting retirement benefits, et cetera, to have that piece there. And Jenny, so do you think I have time to just read this quote and then we can wrap up?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. So in our survey, we also gathered, a lot of anecdotal information, qualitative information. It can really be really powerful to have the words of the workforce themselves to back you up. So here's an educator who said, I would stay in the field if the pay, benefits, and protections were better, but I can't get out of it soon enough, the direction things have been heading. So as Wanzi was saying, the rubber really met the road during the pandemic, and going from being just barely financially solvent to, wow, I need to start having retirement savings before things get serious for me, can really be powerful in helping bring folks along with you as you're building consensus about a potential new program or using dollars towards increasing compensation, for example, for your workforce. And just so you know, you will be getting these slides. We have some information here about distribution of financial hardships, types of financial hardships that programs have that could guide how to distribute one-time dollars. And we've also got juicy stuff about where was the turnover, which types of childcare programs were having the turnover. So please do take a look at the slides when they get sent out. And if you have questions about how California is using this to think through, interventions and policies, do let us know. And you will also have access to many of our reports that summarize the findings that are being applied to policy. And you also, of course, have strategies really quickly. So figure out where you are with your data, establish the basic and in-depth questions that you can or cannot answer, look at funding like the PDG B5 block grant, and think through how can you embed workforce data strategies into your plan as a state.
Thank you, Anna and Wanzi. I hope we can maybe come back to that last slide, maybe when we get to the end, as we're sort of wrapping up with like final takeaways. I want to make sure if you have questions to please drop them in the chat. I've got one question for you. I love that you connected sort of how, what you found out the policy, like by asking questions in your survey, you were able to directly say sort of what are the core needs of this workforce to help them stay in the field. I know that was in relation to the family child care providers needing retirement savings. Can you give us any other examples of sort of any data points that helped kind of point to directly, policy interventions for growing and expanding the workforce or keeping those in the field?
Certainly. So I think on this question I was alluding to around establishing the transitional kindergarten workforce, this is school-based pre-K. There's a new teacher credential that's being designed in California. It's actively in the works. And by default right now, you can only teach in that public school setting if you have the standard credential of a teacher in California. So in designing this policy, if we're going to be relocating a lot of 4-year-olds to this program, where are the teachers going to come from? We're not going to be able to pull 4th, 5th grade teachers indefinitely to staff this new program. So it's really critical to understand how can we funnel pathways for folks. And it's not just the, oh, great, they'll want it because it doubles their salary. It's also a question of what is a mutually agreeable set of qualifications for that credential. So in California, initially they were saying you would need to, even if you've taught for 15 years in pre-K, you're going to need to now go back, be an assistant teacher, work as an intern teacher, and then you can become the teacher of record. And by bringing in this data, we can point out, does that make sense? How are you going to staff a universal program within 3 years if you're putting up this many barriers to the folks that have the most experience? So let's talk about what their experience really is. Let's talk about the qualifications they already have that can give you the confidence that they're ready for those jobs and shouldn't need additional upskilling. So it's a very active and ongoing conversation, but this data has been really important in informing what is the scope of that new credential going to look like.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you, Wanzi and Anna. We're going to come back to you. I am going to bring our friends from Louisiana online here. Give me just a second, Jenny, and there's Nancy. So we're going to move southeast and chat about Louisiana. I'm joined by Jenny Cowan, a project coordinator who leads Louisiana's Early Childhood Workforce Registry, Louisiana Pathways, and Nancy Alexander, director of Northwestern State University's Child and Family Network, which serves as the state's resource referral agency and houses the registry. Thank you both for being here. I know this is a very busy time of year for you. Let's start with just some of the basics of your state's registry. I think I read you've got over 16,000 members. And unlike a lot of registries, as Wanzi and Anna shared, yours is mandatory for at least some of the workforce. Could you tell us a little bit about who it's mandatory for and why that is?
Absolutely. So in Louisiana, our workforce registry is still voluntary, but if you want to become eligible for scholarships or tax credits, you have to enroll. So we get about 150 new enrolls each month. So right now we have just over 16,000 members. So we are the workforce registry. We do career ladder leveling. We have 3 unique career ladders, one for the teachers, one for administrators, one for family childcare home providers. We also provide the forms for the school readiness tax credit that directors and staff could be eligible for annually. We provide scholarships for those teachers that are trying to move up the career ladder, and we support them in that way. And then we also do trainer approval. So for licensing, to meet minimum licensing requirements for annual training, we approve the trainers, not the training.
So you're collecting information on their credentials, of course, as they're moving up the career ladders, education and trainings they're completing. Any other sort of demographic information or other types of data points that you're collecting?
Absolutely. We collect information on whether they're male or female, what language they speak primarily, their entry level of education, what their highest level of education is. And that's kind of where they start. We gather that information with their new enrollment information. And then as they continue in the field, to remain active in our system as they change from employer to employer or job title to job title, we require that they submit the updated employment verification information. But because it is a voluntary program and it's their responsibility to submit this information, sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't.
Mm-hmm. And so I think we talked about this, you're mostly receiving it directly from them, or who else are you sort of partnering with to get the information from?
From them or their center directors.
Okay.
Primarily, sometimes the resource and referral agencies statewide, as they're doing technical assistance with the centers, sometimes they'll gather the information and help them submit it or give them the technical assistance they need to be able to know how to submit it and who to submit it to.
So tell us a little bit about what you know about Louisiana's early childhood workforce based on this data.
Well, we do provide information to our partners. The Louisiana Department of Education is who funds the grants that we function by. And so far this year, the way that those 16,000 people break down, we know that just under 1,500 of them are assigned to the administrator career ladders. So those are our directors, assistant directors, upper level management type positions. And of those, 920 are currently eligible to receive school readiness tax credits for 2022. And almost 15,000 are classroom teachers, assistants, lead teachers, lower level staff. And of those, almost 6,000 are eligible for tax forms as of today. Right now, we only have 64 providers that are working out of their home as licensed home providers right now. But that's a big initiative we're going to be focusing on in the spring. We just revised their career ladder and we'll be doing a big promotion to get those that are registered with the state already enrolled in the workforce registry. And they will be eligible for the school readiness tax credit for the first time in 2023. So we're excited about that. So right now, just under 7,000 of our members are due to receive the tax forms that we're currently preparing to send out. And the reason the state of Louisiana developed the school readiness tax credits was to try to help bridge the salary gap we know exists between our home or our early learning center teachers and our public school teachers. Oftentimes, we have the scholarship funding. We used to operate with about $350,000 annually. That jumped to 2 million when the state of Louisiana instituted a minimum requirement for our lead teachers and publicly funded centers. They now have to have an early childhood ancillary teaching certificate. There are options to meet the requirements for it. The minimum is the CDA credential. So once they instituted that, and they have 2 years to obtain it, our scholarship budget went up to 2 million. Well, just this year, we have found that that is not enough. So we've done a budget revision, got another 1.8, and we are currently seeking approval for another 2 million. So yeah, that's just under 6 for 1 year. So we are putting a lot of money in supporting a lot of teachers. The problem is that turnover has increased. And you get them trained and they either leave to public school or they quit the field altogether. And that's what we're trying to track. So I mentioned that we enroll 150 new employees, but we don't purge 150 employees each month. We don't have a clear way of purging them automatically from our program. So we just do it on a one-on-one basis or as the need comes up. So
yeah, I want to follow up on that. You mentioned, some of the challenges you all face in needing to keep your data clean, as it were, and knowing who's still in the field and who has left it. So I wonder, I know you mentioned when we talked, Jenny, that you've got a new system coming or an updated technology soon, and that will help give the workforce a better ability to sort of insert that data themselves and maybe
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that is one of our biggest hurdles, of course, because we have a team of 7 to facilitate this program for all of our federally funded centers. And they rely on us being able to respond to email or answer phone calls. And we just don't have the ability to do what we need to do and answer one-on-one questions on a daily basis. So what we've been asking for and have been promised is a new data system. It's called EdLink in Louisiana. And so far they're building it in phases, and the workforce registry should be moving along pretty soon, but it will allow members to log in, see their own information, update their own mailing address. If we send tax forms out, we want them to go to an active address, of course, but oftentimes we get those right back because, they've changed and they didn't think to let us know. And then we have to track them down through phone calls. If they've left their center, we hope they have a good telephone number on file so we can figure out where they are and whatnot. But the new data system will allow them to look at where they are, submit their own credentials, documentation, and then will allow their employers as well to verify their employment on a quarterly basis. So therefore, we can move people in and out of the program a lot easier. The centers that are federally funded will be required to verify the employment on that quarterly basis. So then we can communicate with the center as a whole about their staff as a whole, which is a lot easier than communicating with individuals. Of course, we want to provide that technical assistance. It's just really impossible.
Yeah. Okay. So a few things jumped out at me that I think would be good sort of lessons for those of you on the line who indicated that you have neither a registry or a study. And the first one was sort of incentivizing participation. And I think in Louisiana's case, that is through the tax credits. While those don't exist in most states, there's probably other ways that your state could think about incentivizing the workforce to engage with your registry or other data collection mechanism. The other was sort of an inclusive pool of people. So including home-based, as you said, you guys are working on, and you're including aides. I think Anna and Wanzi mentioned this as well, including sort of all types of participants in the workforce. not just lead teachers or just those, in pre-K classrooms or whatever. And then the last one you said was really like the ease of use, like making it now, what eventually when your new system comes, which I hope is sooner than later for you, but ease of use for those workers to get in and document their own changes in the field or credentials. Is there anything else you would add as sort of like big pieces of advice for those on the line?
Absolutely. Design a Q&A system and a package of tutorials that would help eliminate the need for technical assistance. A lot of our teachers, you can give them something in writing, but they would prefer to hear it. They're auditory learners, so they need to hear it and see it work. So if they had video tutorials that kind of walk them through each step of whatever process, I think it would help them enroll in the program, apply for their teaching credential, apply for scholarships, find a training program, figure out, who's an approved trainer, who's not. So all of those questions, if they had an easy source for answers, would be ideal. Because they're, you have to remind them and everybody working with them of the big picture, because they get bogged down on a daily basis working with the kids in their classroom or, trying to meet licensing requirements or this or that. And there's so many different things that they're trying to focus on a daily basis that they might put updating their address with pathways, on the bottom of their priority list.
And another question I have for you is, since you've got this glimpse of sort of who's in your workforce, where they're at on their career ladder, and getting 150 new folks, as you said, a month to enroll, has this data been used to sort of inform policies that are geared towards, recruiting and retaining and really growing the workforce in Louisiana?
It has definitely been used to change policy. We have the tax credit was actually written into law. Our workforce registry was part of that law. There's a new law that requires the teaching certificate. They use our data to draw down federal dollars for early childhood. It guides changes to the career ladders, things like that. But I've recently talked with our partners with the Department of Education about doing some surveys and some workforce studies to see, how many teachers are actively working in childcare today or on any given day. How many licensed centers do we have at the beginning of each month? What is the true need? Where are they? What do they need? Once we help them obtain their teaching certificate, what incentives are their employers giving them? If they can't raise their hourly wage, are they giving them bonuses? And so those are questions that we don't actively capture in our system. We don't keep salary information either. So these are things that I think is important to find out, and hopefully we'll be able to do some surveys early in the year and help guide that and encourage the centers, if they're not incentivizing them in some way, to do so.
Well, and as we heard from Anna and Wansi, that they complement each other, right? Surveys and the registry, that the data can then be used to give you a really robust understanding of where your workforce is at. I want to throw up your contact information in case folks have questions. And I do want to just also note that the sort of the opportunities ahead, it sounds like you guys are moving towards building a more robust system. We've got folks on the line, sort of all different stages that maybe don't have any registry or haven't done a survey at all, and everywhere in between. So I want to mention some opportunities that states have to build up their data. I think Wansi mentioned the next round of preschool development birth through 5 grants. The states recently applied for funding for, and this has a focus on the workforce. So definitely an opportunity for states to think about tapping into those funds to improve their data. And I also mentioned COVID relief funds at the beginning, in which we talked about that the Administration of Children and Families is really recommending to states that they tap into the increased discretionary funds through the Child Care Development Block Grant to use that sort of temporary dollars or one-time dollars towards both compensation for the workforce as well as investing in these data systems and collection. So these aren't unlimited funds. They might be temporary. They are temporary or one time, but it leads me to sort of my last question for you, Jenny and Nancy, if you want to chime in. If you had unlimited funds, how would you improve your state's data collection?
Well, for me, that new system they've promised is really vital. And so we're going to be working on that. But I'll turn it over to Nancy and let her share some of the things that they do, because the resource and referral agency is, very different from our workforce registry, and they have been getting a lot of state dollars as well to go back into early childhood.
Well, one of the things as far as pathways is concerned is, and I'm sure Jenny will agree, would be to have enough staff to personally interview the teachers and the directors in the field, because certainly a paper or email survey is good, but I think there are things that they would tell us as anecdotes that would be helpful, and that a lengthy discussion would bring out a lot of issues that may not show up on paper. So that would be one thing for that. The other, I would like to see a massive training program for people who are not yet working in childcare. One of our disadvantages is that we have a lot of money for training right now, but we're taking people as a priority who are already working in the field. And my analogy to that has always been, if you go to the doctor and the nurse says, I'm going to give you a shot, I've never done it before, but I once practiced on an orange, you're going to find another clinic. So we're training people after they've had the chance to make a lot of mistakes. And I think that's unfortunate. I'd also like to insert here something that we are preparing to do at this time. Several years ago, pre-COVID, a director told us that for the first year, she had sent out more W-2s of people who no longer worked for her than who were currently employed. And we begin to think about that and talk to some others, and they had similar situations. So we put together a quick survey, because it was at the time of year they were doing that, and compared the results of the data that we got, which was pretty limited. But at that time, it was 69% in rural areas and 70% in urban areas. Now, what we didn't do, we did not factor in the people who are hired temporarily, like school-age workers in the summer, where I don't consider that turnover, because they're hired to work 3 months, you expect them to leave. So that's a little different. And so this year we're getting ready to do that again. And for you researchers, this may seem way too simplistic, but on the other hand, if you're willing to work with us on it, I would love to brainstorm some questions and things. We want to compare urban and rural, and we also want to compare the 3 types of licensing that we have in Louisiana to get some data on turnover now that we're post-pandemic, in an easy way so people can respond easily.
Yeah.
So, but basically solving the training issue where we have a source of people to hire from, people who have already been trained, know what they're doing, and can come in and hit the ground running. That's what I think is our next major big step that we have to take.
I think there's probably a lot of folks on the line who are wishing they had that in their states as well. What I'm wondering if anyone on the line would like to unmute or drop in the chat sort of a question that you have about your workforce in your state that you haven't been able to answer, or maybe just occurred to you in the last hour or so. But if there's a question around your workforce that you are noodling on and thinking about policy interventions, feel free to chime in. And while we're waiting, I'll throw the same question over to Wanzi and Anna. If you had unlimited funds, what would you do in California or any state, I suppose?
Certainly. Well, I'll start by saying that data collection is an important piece, but I think we know enough to know that you could immediately deploy dollars into getting them directly to the educators. That would be a big deal in helping shore up the workforce. So dedicating dollars to gathering data on an ongoing basis is great. But we're already seeing some areas, states, territories, localities piloting strategies, sometimes with their one-time, ARP dollars, for example. But and those have helped. Those have absolutely made a difference in making it less of a crisis than it otherwise would have been. So that would be the first order of business. And I just dropped a few links that have some of these state-by-state examples, including recent data that you may have seen that's come out about the ways in which, for example, those ARPA dollars in particular were instrumental in making the collapse less collapsed.
Yes, I can just add on to what Anna said, is that I think the crisis, again, is not new. We've always known about that. And for California, for example, our data from the previous workforce study we did in 2006 was still relevant in terms of being able to make decisions, especially with regards to the compensation and the workforce benefits and working conditions, because it's almost like ensuring that we close the hole beneath this bucket. So I think if we had really tons of money, we could try to fix the hole by making sure that the workforce is compensated and they will stay. And even like Nancy was suggesting, that let's train them so that they come and hit the ground running, but they need to be in spaces where they can make a living. Otherwise they will be trained and then they will move on again. So I think that's like, yes, deploying the dollars to where it will make the biggest impact.
I would say, this is Patrick in Mississippi. We are trying to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I would say that we are implementing with some of our discretionary ARPA funds, scholarships to try to educate and get credentialing for all the workforce. We're also doing supplemental payments for the workforce is one of the plans. We're going to looking at implementing a substitute pool of teachers for the workforce to help provide some, much needed assistance, as well as we're in the implementation for procuring a data system that would do more of this workforce registry. It would help track continuing education hours and allow people to sign up. So there's a lot of things currently in flight, but they haven't quite been fully implemented or actualized.
I was going to chime in and say sometimes it's not just the money too. It's the structure and the way the center hours are different compared to public school. Public school teachers get off early. They have lots of holidays. They have their summers off. You just can't compete with that when you have early learning centers open 6 to 6 in order to service working parents. So I think what Patrick said about the sub pool is really important, and Louisiana has tried working on that as well. It's just really difficult to do when you have the background check requirements and the things like that. You want to make sure that you're putting qualified individuals into the classrooms, period. So
I think that's exactly right. And I would also echo that Louisiana, I'm assuming, has some issues like Mississippi. We're so rural that, we haven't implemented the substitute pool, but my assumption is that it will be much more beneficial in more urban areas. I don't even know if we would say that Mississippi has that many urban areas, but in population centers versus some of the more rural areas.
We do have a couple questions in the chat that I'll read out. We have two here. I'll read them together and then allow our presenters to weigh in on either of those. So Storm asks, has there been any effort in either a workforce study or registry to try and capture the unlicensed child care providers? For example, maybe providers who were licensed but decided to not be licensed anymore, to better understand how to get that workforce back into the licensed space. And then Patrick Snyder asks, I've had child care providers say that with workforce shortages, they face a lot of stress before and after school, as well as holiday times and summer. Has any states allowed trained 16 and 17-year-olds to become aides and actually get experience to see if they want to pursue careers in early childhood care? So we'll throw those two questions out. Jenny, I do believe there is, in some of our workforce slides we shared a couple weeks ago, there has been some work to get high schoolers a little more involved. So you can speak to that a little.
Yeah, we can certainly provide some resources on that in the resources that come after the webinar is over. But I wonder if anybody has a response to Storm's question about the capturing unlicensed care.
We are working on in Mississippi. One of our plans is working to it's called the Nurturing Homes Initiative, and it is to capture those at-home providers who aren't registered and who aren't licensed, and to try to build that network up in the state and really kind of beef up the communication systems and the education, and also trying to bring up the quality levels for all childcare providers.
for us in Louisiana, of course, we know it's a concern. We know that there's a missing population out there that's hard to capture. So I think, what we're trying to do is just incentivize them come forward, because there are benefits to being registered with the state. They can participate in the child and adult food program, accept children on child care assistance, get scholarships and tax credits. So I think just communicating to our communities as a whole to try to capture their interest, if they're doing it anyway, come forward, become registered for these benefits, and then we can monitor and make sure that they are providing quality care as well.
We are just about out of time, so I feel like we've only begun to scratch the surface. If this is a topic that you are still interested in and learning more, please reach out to Patrick or I. He's got a few examples there listed answering your question, Representative Steiner, but we will certainly provide those in an email as well. Another colleague shared in the chat a link to a webinar that we've got this Thursday. I want to make sure you all know about, where we'll be sort of doing a look ahead for other policies affecting children and families, and summarizing sort of trends that we've noticed over the last year. I want to thank you so much for all the attendees for your attention and for your questions, and to our presenters, thank you for your time and lending your expertise. And we hope you don't mind if we follow up with a few questions afterwards. Everyone, take care, and we wish you a safe and healthy holiday season. Thanks very much.